Tonight on The Story, we begin at Portland City Hall, where a massive budget crisis looms. Layoffs are coming, and departments across the city are being told to prepare to trim down, including police and fire. So I sat down with the man in charge of it all, not Mayor Keith Wilson, but City Administrator Michael Jordan. It's our big story tonight. Let's first set the budget stage for you. Last fall, the city announced the shortfall would be around $27 million. Not great, but seemingly manageable when the annual budget is north of $8 billion, with the general fund making up around $730 million. But that all changed a month ago when the city announced that budget gap had ballooned to around $100 million, with the fiscal year ending June 30th. Now, a good chunk of that increase is due to the loss of tens of millions of dollars in one-time funding that simply ran out. And that's where I started my conversation with City Administrator Michael Jordan, the man who runs the day-to-day operations of the city of Portland.
So I've heard a lot about that, those one-time dollars. A lot of people I talk with are like, well, duh, they're one-time dollars. Why didn't they account for that? What do you think about that now that we're facing those side effects?
Well, I think it's always been to some degree predictable that these would be challenges. And I think the previous administration felt that the challenges on the streets were such that it was worth putting those programs together and then trying to face the challenges when they came. And now they've come.
How convenient when there is an entirely new administration, and not to mention a brand new form of government left to deal with this mess. Jordan says that Mayor Ted Wheeler and the former city commissioners put a lot of one-time federal dollars towards creating programs to address the homeless crisis, but that money has gone away. Yet, as we know, the crisis remains. More on that later for sure. But let's get into the direct impacts that Portlanders could be feeling with a budget deficit like this.
So let's talk about some of the options the city is considering to cut. We're seeing 120 staffers could be laid off. Which departments, and will there be more than that, do you think?
So those layoffs are across the entire city. They're not just in the general fund. So those were proposals that came up from bureaus through the service areas to the leadership to consider. Not all the proposed cuts were taken so far. And I want to clarify, what's coming out at the end of the month is not a balanced budget. It is a set of alternatives that is meant to elicit input from both the public and from the council to prepare the mayor for producing a balanced budget, which he's required to do by early May.
The 120 staffers, are we still looking at that number, or is it going to be substantially higher?
It's the beginning number. It's possible that it could go up.
So what departments are you looking at, though, for any potential staff cuts?
Well, all of them, almost.
So the big question here, could public safety departments like police and fire face layoffs? The short answer is yes. Ted Wheeler's administration asked that no budget cuts be made from police, fire, and emergency communications during the last budget cycle. Perhaps that was because two of the men who led those departments were Mayor Ted Wheeler and Commissioner Renee Gonzalez, who, of course, had votes on council at the time. Well, that's not the case anymore with this new form of government. Jordan and his deputies run the bureaus, while council is focused on policy. And the new council wanted budget cut proposals from police and fire this time around.
The new council, when they came into office in January, asked for public safety to present similar proposals for cuts. So we now have those also, and they'll be included in the February document. So you'll see reductions across all areas.
Jordan says nearly 70% of the total general fund is for public safety. If no cuts are made to public safety, that puts way more pressure on other programs, mainly ones meant to address homelessness and the Parks and Rec Bureau.
And so I think it's probably unrealistic, even though we're at an early phase of considering the alternatives, for the general fund it's going to be very challenging to not take any cuts in public safety and balance the general fund.
There was some public safety groups, police and fire, were surprised that they had to submit potential budget cuts. What do you have to say to their surprise?
Well, I haven't heard that they were surprised. I mean, I've heard that they would rather not, and I don't blame them for that. But I think we did cuts last year, going into last year's budget. The mayor asked for 5% cuts, but held public safety harmless. And that carried through the entire budget process. This year, the challenge is greater. The mayor asked for 5% and 8% cuts, so asked for higher levels of cuts from all bureaus. And then the new council, believing that it wasn't really fair to at least not have public safety's alternatives on the table, asked for those too. I don't think anyone should be surprised about that. Not happy about it? Sure.
And it's no surprise that public safety is a major concern for Portlanders. So
Huge.
What kind of message does this send if those departments are facing cuts?
Well, I think it sends the message that this is a very challenging budget cycle.
I mean, I just feel like people are going to watch this and they're going to be like, we already don't have enough police officers.
And I think that's fair. And I'm hoping that the public weighs in, and I think they will, in the next couple of months as we deliberate on what the mayor's proposed budget needs to be, that people will weigh in and say, public safety is a huge priority for us. And so if you're making cuts, don't make them to public safety.
What I'm hearing from you right now is it's fluid at this point.
Oh, for sure. The things that will come out from my office at the end of the month, next week, will simply be recommendations and alternatives.
I also asked Jordan about PBOT's director recently telling council that her department faces a $38 million budget gap, using stark terms to describe what that could mean if it's not addressed.
Saying if it stays that way, quote, assets failing, safety compromised, livability diminished, public trust destroyed. Hearing that, what's your reaction?
Well, I appreciate that the director of the Bureau of Transportation is going to paint that as a pretty desperate situation, and it is. But I don't think all of those things that she mentioned aren't on-off switches. They're variable. And I believe that this is not a new situation for the Bureau of Transportation. It's been coming for many years. It is a structural problem with the way Oregonians pay for the maintenance of their transportation system. And the city of Portland by itself can't change that structural problem. So we are faced both with what can we do locally to try and either bolster revenue or like increase parking fees or those kinds of things, and what can we prioritize in the transportation system that are the highest priority issues for Portlanders. So trying to make sure the potholes don't get too big, making sure that when you ride your bike in a bike lane, it's relatively safe to ride that bike. Those kinds of issues, I think, are going to be some of the highest priorities we try to preserve in a very challenging time.
But people will probably have to wait longer for, say, those potholes to be filled.
The cycle times might get longer, for sure.
Other potential cuts are within the Parks and Rec Bureau. Jordan says certain community centers could be on the chopping block. Not just programs in community centers, but wholesale shutdowns. It's too early to tell which centers could close. Also at risk, community assistance programs. Think grants for arts, community-based organizations, neighborhood associations. Even money the city gives small businesses recovering from weather-related incidents. So far, Jordan says the city's grant programs have been asked to reduce those grant programs by 5% and 8%, like the rest of the city's departments.
We also have obviously lots of programs regarding the homeless right now. So that's another whole realm of assistance.
Can you speak any more specifics? Are we talking Portland Street Response? Like what type of programs?
Not Portland Street Response, but Public Environmental Maintenance Organization, or PEMO. That's one program that actually goes out and does interactions with community and is a problem solver kind of organization that tries to alleviate issues on the ground in neighborhoods. So that's one program. There is a street coordination group that actually has outreach workers that deal with homeless folks, and that up until just a few years ago was predominantly a county service. We decided at some point a few years ago that we needed to have folks who did outreach and navigation for homeless folks on the street. So that's another outreach service program. There is the IRP program, which is the impact reduction program, which is predominantly about camps and the impacts in neighborhoods of camps and trying to deal with those issues, along with then the sheltering. So just a myriad of services that are supplied.
If there are cuts, say, to the impact reduction program, can people expect to see fewer homeless camps removed?
Yes. If in fact what we have looked at regarding when the 5 and 8% cuts that were asked for really is the elimination of one crew out of, I think, 24. So would they see a reduction in service? Yes. Would it be noticeable? I don't know. 1 out of 24 doesn't seem like a huge change in the level of service, but it's something. And people would probably notice maybe shorter cycle times from when they call about a camp and we actually go out and inspect and rate and post and then have some action. So they might see an extra week, maybe longer.
So what are your thoughts on the mayor's blueprint for ending unsheltered homelessness that could cost somewhere around $28 million as we're talking about this budget shortfall? What do you think about that?
I think it's great. I'm kidding. No, I mean, the mayor ran on this unsheltered homelessness approach, and he is committed to try and make that happen, and you've heard him. He wants it to happen this year, before the next winter season.
Is it realistic financially, though, given where we are?
It depends. He is speaking both with the state legislature and the governor. He's also speaking with Metro, who supplies the support dollars for homeless services. He's also speaking, obviously, with Multnomah County, who is our closest partner in trying to provide these services. And the mayor is, I think, boldly advocating for a different approach.
So will the city realistically be able to bring in the resources needed to achieve that different approach? Well, that remains to be seen. Jordan says they will know more come late June when the legislative session wraps up, and as for how much money the state will contribute to Wilson's lofty plan. I ended my conversation with Administrator Jordan asking about his future and how the process will play out to find the next administrator to run the city of Portland, since it was not clear that Jordan would be sticking around as long as he has.
Okay, so last year you told our Pat Doris that you wouldn't stay in this role any longer than you had to. What changed?
Nothing. I'm staying as long as I have to.
Okay, very good. That's a good answer.
Yeah, I mean, the mayor asked me if I would stay until the end of the calendar year rather than June 30, which is when my contract ended, and his reasoning is, I think very valid, and that bringing on another new leadership role right in the middle of what is going to be, as we've just discussed for a while, a very challenging budget, I think it is reasonable for him to say, can we put off that change for another 6 months until we've got a stable budget, and even though it may involve difficult choices. So what I'm planning to do with the mayor and with the council is to start a recruitment project, a process this summer, and it will be, probably one of the biggest recruitment processes the city's ever done. This role is a big role, a challenging role. It will be a nationwide search, and I'm sure that both the council and other stakeholders in the community will want to be a part of that. I'm hopeful that before the holidays, we would have at least made an offer to someone and hopefully have them in the chair by the end of the calendar year, and then I can go do something else.
Next week, we will get the latest budget memo. It will be a new updated set of recommended cuts, and we'll be sure to bring you the highlights. Then it's up to the public and the City Council to share their thoughts on those potential cuts before the mayor's proposed budget comes out in early May. From there, Council can amend it, and we'll have to approve the budget before the new fiscal year begins on July 1st. And oh, by the way, it's not just the City of Portland. Multnomah County is in a similar boat, facing a budget shortfall in the $100 million range. So cuts are coming for both the city and the county this summer. All right, so that was a lot, but what are your thoughts on what Michael Jordan had to say today? How do you feel about potential cuts to police, fire, PBOT, and homeless services? Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090.